The morning I found the birthday card was the morning everything became clear to me. It was tucked between two cookbooks on the kitchen shelf, the ones I never moved because they had been there since Raymond was alive. My granddaughter Lily had made it for me the year before, crayon flowers on construction paper. My name spelled out in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, Grammy Bev. She'd pressed so hard with the red crayon that it had left grooves in the paper. I ran my thumb across it and stood there in my kitchen for a long moment, just holding it. That was my 68th birthday, a Tuesday in April. My son hadn't called. He hadn't forgotten, I found out later. He'd simply decided the day wasn't worth mentioning. I should explain how we got there because it didn't happen all at once. Things like this never do. They arrive slowly, the way water gets into a house, through cracks so small you don't notice them until one morning you step onto the floor and feel the soft give beneath your feet, and you realize the damage has been going on for a long time. My son's name is Trevor. He is 41 years old. He has his father's eyes and his father's laugh and, unfortunately, very little of his father's sense of responsibility. I say this not to be cruel. I say it because it is true, and because I spent too many years not saying true things about Trevor out loud, even to myself. His wife is Amber. She came into our lives 8 years ago, and I genuinely tried, to love her the way a mother-in-law should. She is a beautiful woman, sharp dresser, knows how to walk into a room, but there is a kind of warmth that some people simply do not have, and Amber does not have it. She has politeness when she wants something, and indifference when she doesn't, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to learn the difference. They have 2 children, Lily, who is 8 now, and a boy named Connor, who just turned 5. Those children are the reason I kept quiet as long as I did. You tell yourself you're keeping the peace for the grandchildren. You tell yourself a lot of things. I live in Shreveport, Louisiana. Raymond and I bought this house in 1989 and raised Trevor here, in this neighborhood with the pecan trees along the back fence and the porch that faces west so you can watch the whole sky go orange in the evening. Raymond passed 6 years ago. Heart attack. Very sudden, no warning. And after that, I was on my own for the first time in my adult life. I managed. I want to be clear about that. I have a pension from 31 years of working as a medical billing supervisor, and Raymond left a life insurance policy, and I own this house outright. I am not a wealthy woman, but I am a careful one. Raymond used to say I could make $1 stretch into a week, and he wasn't wrong. About 2 years after Raymond passed, Trevor came to me with a problem. He and Amber were behind on their mortgage. Not catastrophically, he said, just a temporary cash flow issue. His contracting business was slow that season. This was winter, which is genuinely slow for outdoor work in Louisiana, and they needed help getting through the next couple of months. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my son. I gave him $4,000. I told him it was a gift, not a loan. I didn't want money to sit between us with interest attached. The next spring, he needed help again. The truck needed repairs. It was a work truck, he explained, not optional. He couldn't run the business without it. $2,200. I gave it. Then there was a tax situation. Amber's credit cards, a missed insurance payment that would have lapsed the family's health coverage. Each time there was a reason, and each reason was real enough that I couldn't say no without feeling like I was being heartless. I want you to understand something. I never once did the math. I didn't add it up. I think I didn't add it up on purpose. What I noticed first, before I did the math, before anything, was the way the holidays started to feel. Thanksgiving 2024. I had been cooking for 2 days. A full spread, turkey, cornbread dressing, sweet potato casserole, green beans with the smoked turkey necks the way Raymond's mother taught me, a pecan pie from scratch. The table was set for 8, Trevor and Amber, both kids, Amber's mother Diane, and her husband, and Amber's sister with her boyfriend who was visiting from Dallas. I had not met Amber's sister's boyfriend before. That detail matters only because I want you to understand how it felt to be at that table. 8 people. My house, my food, my dishes, my hours of work. And I sat at the far end, between Connor and the boyfriend from Dallas, and most of the conversation happened at Amber's end, around her mother, and I was past things without much ceremony and thanked briefly, and that was about it. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being sensitive. But then, and this is the part I have turned over in my mind many times since, when we were clearing the table, Amber said to her mother, "Diane, you have to share that dip recipe. Everyone loved it." Diane had brought a store-bought appetizer tray I had cooked for 2 days. And the compliment that floated over that table, the only food-related compliment I heard all evening, was for the container of dip from the grocery store. I washed dishes for an hour after everyone left and told myself it was nothing. My birthday is April 8th. I've had 68 of them. When Raymond was alive, he made a production of it. Not extravagant, but thoughtful. He'd get up early and make biscuits and put a candle in mine. When Trevor was small, he'd make cards, badly drawn, absolutely sincere. This past April, I woke up to nothing. No call, no text, no knock at the door. Trevor lives 11 minutes from my house. I have timed it. It's the kind of distance you drive for a birthday. At 2 in the afternoon, I got a text. It said, "Happy Bay, Mom. Crazy week. Talk soon." That was it. That was the whole thing. I sat on the porch for a while after I read it. The pecan trees were starting to come in that first bright green. A neighbor walked by with her dog and waved and called out, "Happy birthday," because she'd seen it on Facebook, and I waved back and smiled, and after she passed, I sat very still and felt something that I can only describe as a decision forming somewhere deep behind my sternum. Not anger. Something quieter than anger. Something that had been a long time coming. The spa bill arrived 3 weeks later. I want to be precise here because the detail matters. Trevor called me on a Sunday evening while I was watching television, and after about 4 minutes of general conversation, he mentioned casually, "The way you mention something you assume will be fine," that Amber had treated herself and Diane to a spa day for Mother's Day, a nice place in Bossier City, and the bill had come out to $340, and things were tight this month, and did I think I could help cover it? I did not say anything for a moment. He said, "Mom, you there?" I said, "I'm here." He said the place had been really good for Amber. She'd been stressed. He said Diane had loved it. He said it like these were reasons I would understand. I told him I'd have to think about it and I'd call him back. I hung up the phone and I sat in the same chair where I watch my programs, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the Thanksgiving table. I thought about the birthday text. I thought about the $4,000 and the truck and the credit cards and the insurance and all the other checks I had written over 3 years without once doing the math. So I did the math. I got out my checkbook register. I keep paper records, I always have. And I went back 38 months and I wrote down every transfer, every check, every time I had sent money to my son. The total was $41,200. I wrote that number on a piece of paper and looked at it for a long time. $41,000. And I did not get a phone call on my birthday. I did not call Trevor back that night, or the next day. On Tuesday, I called my neighbor Rosemary, who has been my closest friend for 22 years and who has always been more clear-eyed about my family than I have been. I told her the spa bill story, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Beverly, how long are you going to keep doing this?" I didn't have an answer, but I think that was the point. On Wednesday, I called my bank. I have a financial advisor there, a woman named Sandra who I've worked with for 4 years. I told her I wanted to talk through some changes. She said to come in Thursday morning. I didn't sleep well Wednesday night. I lay in bed listening to the house settle and thought about Trevor at 7 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor sorting baseball cards, telling me the stats of every player like he was teaching me something important. I thought about him at 17, the night of his first fender bender, how scared he was to tell Raymond, and how Raymond had handled it with more patience than I expected. I thought about carrying him years before all of that, the weight of him, the specific weight of your own child, which you never forget. Love is not the issue. I want to be clear about that. I have never for one moment stopped loving my son. But there is a difference between love and what I had been doing. What I had been doing was making it possible for him to not be responsible, making it easy to forget my birthday, making it so that the cost of taking me for granted was nothing, because I would absorb it. I had been so afraid of his discomfort that I had made myself comfortable with my own diminishment. I thought about all of that on Wednesday night and I did not sleep. But by the time the sky started lightening, I knew what I was going to do. I was at the bank by 8:45 Thursday morning. Sandra has a corner office with a window that looks out onto the parking lot, which is not glamorous, but she makes up for the view with the quality of her attention. She listens the way people used to listen, fully, without looking at her phone. I told her everything. The 41,000, the birthday text, the spa bill, the Thanksgiving table and the store-bought dip. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What would you like to do?" I told her. I wanted to restructure my accounts so that the joint emergency account Trevor had access to, something Raymond and I had set up years ago when Trevor was young and we wanted to be able to help quickly in a real emergency, would be closed and the funds transferred to a new account in my name only. I wanted to review the beneficiary designations of my retirement accounts and my life insurance policy. And I wanted to talk about my estate plan because I hadn't revisited it since Raymond died. Sandra nodded like none of this surprised her. We spent 2 hours going through everything. By the time I left, the joint account was closed. An appointment was scheduled with an estate attorney Sandra trusted, a woman named, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I left that bank feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like myself. I stopped at a bakery on the way home and bought a slice of lemon cake because I had never gotten myself a birthday cake and I decided 68 was a reasonable age to start. I sat in my car in the parking lot and ate it with a plastic fork and watched people go in and out of the dry cleaner next door and felt the quiet satisfaction of a decision made cleanly and without drama. I called Trevor that evening. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting. He probably assumed I was calling about the spa bill. I told him I was calling to let him know I had closed the joint account and that going forward I would not be able to provide financial assistance the way I had been. I told him I said this with love, not with anger. I told him I thought it was time we both adjusted to a new arrangement. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Mom, what are you talking about?" I said I was talking about the $41,000. I had done the math. I told him the number. Another silence. Longer this time. He said, "That can't be right." I told him I had the checkbook register in front of me and he was welcome to come look at it. He didn't come look at it. He said he needed to talk to Amber and he'd call me back. He called back 40 minutes later and the call was not pleasant. There was some raising of voices. His, not mine. He said I was being dramatic. He said he'd always planned to pay me back. He said Amber was upset, that I was making her feel like a bad person. I let him finish. Then I said, "Trevor, I love you, but I'm 68 years old and I sent you $41,000 and you sent me a 2-sentence text on my birthday. I'm not angry, I'm just done." He hung up. I won't pretend the next few weeks were easy. They weren't. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from a conflict with your child. Even when you know you're right, you second guess yourself at 2 in the morning. You pick up the phone and put it down again. You wonder if you're being punished, and then you wonder if you deserve to be, and then you have to talk yourself through the difference between guilt and truth. Lily called me on a Saturday, about 10 days after the difficult phone call. She called from her little kid tablet. Trevor and Amber let her video chat with me sometimes, and she showed me a picture she'd drawn at school. It was our house, the one with the pecan trees, and she'd drawn me standing on the porch, and she said, "I gave you a big smile, Grammy, because you always smile when I come over." I told her she was my favorite artist in the whole world, and she laughed and told me that Connor drew a dog that looked like a potato, and she was definitely better. After we hung up, I cried a little. Not sad crying. The other kind. I understood, holding that call in my mind, that none of this was about money. The money was just where it became visible. It was about what I was willing to accept in my own life, about whether the people around me would know, because I had shown them that I required care, that I required acknowledgement, that I was not a resource to be accessed, but a person to be known. I had not shown them that, not for a long time. Trevor came to see me on a Sunday, about 5 weeks after that phone call. He came alone, without Amber, which told me he'd thought about this more carefully than the first conversation suggested he was capable of. He pulled into the driveway and sat in his truck for a few minutes before coming to the door, and I noticed that through the kitchen window, but I didn't go out to rush him. I made coffee. I had biscuits I'd made that morning. I always make biscuits on Sunday. It's 40 years of habit. And I put them on a plate, and when he came in, I poured 2 cups and sat down across from him and waited. He looked tired. He's gotten some gray at his temples in the last couple of years, and sitting across from him in my kitchen that morning, it was more visible than usual. He said, "Mom, I don't know how to start this." I said, "Start with whatever's true." He thought about that for a while. Then he said he'd been going through the numbers, their numbers, his and Amber's, and when he looked at it honestly, they had been living about 30% beyond what they actually earned for the past 3 years. He said he hadn't wanted to see it. He said it was easier not to see it when the gap kept getting filled. I listened. He said he was sorry about the birthday. He said he didn't have an excuse. He said he'd been so deep in his own stress that he'd let things slip that shouldn't slip, and that was not an excuse, just an explanation, and that he knew the difference. I appreciated that. I told him so. He said he and Amber were going to work with a financial counselor. He had already made an appointment. He said it wasn't going to be comfortable, but that he was doing it. I looked at my son across my kitchen table, this man who had once sorted baseball cards on my kitchen floor, who still had his father's eyes, and I felt the complicated love that children produce in their parents, the love that is not simple and not comfortable, and does not require you to say yes to everything. I told him I was glad he'd come. I told him I loved him. I told him that what I had changed was not going to change back, not because I was punishing him, but because something had shifted in me that I wasn't willing to undo. He nodded. He ate a biscuit. He didn't ask me to reconsider. Before he left, he hugged me in the doorway the way he hadn't hugged me in years, the way he used to, with some actual weight behind it. And then he got in his truck and drove down the street with the pecan trees, and I watched him go. I have a routine now that I have come to love. Thursday mornings, I go to a book club at the library, 5 women, all within a decade of my age, and we are ruthless and funny, and sometimes we don't even talk about the book, which is perhaps the whole point. Friday evenings, I walk the neighborhood a long loop that takes 40 minutes if I don't stop to talk to anyone, and over an hour if I do. On Sundays, I make biscuits and call Lily on her tablet. Rosemary and I have started taking day trips. Last month, we drove up to Natchitoches and walked along the Cane River and ate at a place that had the best fried catfish I've had since Raymond and I went to a little spot on the Red River years ago. On the drive home, Rosemary said, "You seem different." I asked her different how. She said, "Lighter." I thought about that, lighter. After 68 years, lighter. What I know now? What I wish I had known sooner, though I'm not sure I could have known it sooner. I think you have to live your way to some truths. Is that there is no virtue in making yourself small. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being the kind of mother who helps, the kind of grandmother who is always there, the kind of woman who doesn't make a fuss. But there is a difference between being there for your family and disappearing into them. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I had started to disappear. The morning I did the math. The morning I sat in my chair and wrote that number on a piece of paper, and finally looked at it. That was the morning I started coming back. I don't know what the next years hold. Trevor and I talk every week now. Shorter calls, more honest ones. Amber is polite in the careful way she has always been, which I no longer expect to change and no longer need to change. Lily drew me another picture last month. She's in a horse phase. All her drawings are horses now, and she mailed it to me in an actual envelope with a stamp she'd chosen herself, a butterfly stamp, and I have it on the refrigerator. I made myself a birthday cake this year. Lemon, same as the parking lot slice. I lit a candle and I sat alone at my kitchen table and I blew it out and I felt, in that quiet moment, exactly like myself. Not a resource, not a background figure, not an afterthought at my own table. Just Beverly, 68 years old, and her house with the pecan trees finally quietly taking up the space she deserved. That is enough. That has always been enough. I just had to remember it. I've thought a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself. Not the version of me who made mistakes. We all make those, but the version who kept quiet about them, who smiled through Thanksgiving dinners and told herself she was being sensitive, who looked at a 2-sentence birthday text and found excuses for it. That's the version I'd want to sit down with. What I'd tell her is this: the way people treat you is a conversation, and you are always one of the speakers. I don't mean that harshly. I mean it, the way I've come to understand it, which is with some compassion for how it happens. You give once because you love someone. You give again because it's easier than the alternative. And slowly, without any single moment you can point to, you have taught everyone around you what you are willing to accept. That's not a moral failing. That's just how it works. The question is whether you're willing to change the conversation. Trevor didn't become the man who forgot my birthday because he was born careless. He became that man because for 3 years forgetting cost him nothing. I don't say that to excuse him. There is no excuse for a 2-sentence text to your mother on her birthday, none. But I say it because understanding how something happened is different from approving of it. I gave him $41,000, and I absorbed every slight, and I told myself I was being the bigger person. What I was actually doing was making smallness comfortable for both of us. His smallness toward me, and my own smallness toward myself. The Thursday morning I drove to that bank, something in me that had been very still for a long time started moving again. It wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect a story like this to be about revenge, about the satisfaction of watching someone suffer consequences. That wasn't it. What it was more like clarity. The act of finally treating my own life as something worth protecting. You can love your child completely and still decide that you are not a bank, not a background, not an afterthought. Those two things are not in conflict. It took me longer than it should have to understand that, but I understand it now. There is a kind of courage that nobody talks about much, and it's the courage to disappoint someone you love for the sake of your own dignity, not to punish them, not to win. Just to say, this is where I am, and I am not moving. That takes something. It took me 68 years and a piece of paper with a number written on it, but I got there. Lily mailed me that drawing with the butterfly stamp. Connor's dog still looks like a potato. Trevor and I talk on the phone every week now. Real conversations, the kind where something is actually said. None of that would have happened if I had kept absorbing. The relationship we have now exists because I stopped making it easy to take me for granted. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to disappear. I'm not telling anyone what to do with their own life. I'm just telling you what I learned from mine. How you let people treat you has a way of compounding in both directions, toward less or toward more. And you get to choose which direction that goes. Maybe not all at once, maybe just one Thursday morning at a time.